Instruction is English. The core mathematics courses include algebra, real analysis, complex analysis, programming and data structures, differential equations, probability and statistics worth 34 credits. The 26 credits of elective courses are on graph theory, image processing, soft computing, cryptography, coding theory, computer graphics. Some of the core and elective courses have a practical component consisting of computer-based programming exercises that implement algorithms and techniques taught in the course. To give you some hands-on experience, the program has a project at the 4th semester. After completing the program, you may join research institutes, industry or teaching profession at any level based on your interest and aptitude. You can join the program during the January admission cycle or the July admission cycle. So what are you waiting for? You go to IGNOU Samarth admission portal and register yourself.
Hello learners. So for today's session we are going to talk about Goblin market, which is prescribed in one of the courses that is being offered in English Honours Bachelor's program at IGNOU. So the course is coded as BEGC 110 and titled as British Literature 19th Century. We will talk about the poem Goblin Market. We'll talk about the perspectives that one can develop and one can have, while reading the text and understanding it. But even before we get into the text and talk about the author, it is of utmost importance to know at least this for a fact, that one is getting to read an author, a poet like Christina Rossetti or Elizabeth Barrett Browning for that matter, in the 19th century British literature syllabuses as a result of the part of the recovery project that has taken years. Had it not been for this recovery, retracing of the tradition of female writing that goes back to centuries, Christina Rossetti or Browning, who has been often referred only as Mrs. Browning, would not have been read, would not have been anthologized, would not have been appreciated. So that is what we are getting into. That is who we are reading when we are thinking and trying to understand a poem written by such an author. So this awareness is very important. And to read such a poem like Goblin Market or Aurora Leigh by Elizabeth Barrett Browning, this reading itself is a very intensive act in retracing and reiterating the female agency. This is a very important idea which we will try to uncover further within the context of the poem. So female agency not only at the level of the creator but also at the level of the creation, because the story that the poem tells, because it is often referred as story poem, is very important and somehow lends a different meaning altogether, because we are reading about two female protagonists of the poem written by a female author. So these identities, these markers are very significant in terms of contextualizing the larger poem within the larger environment of the 19th century British literary circle, and the amount of liberty, the amount of agency that was given to a female author / poet to talk about the topics that they are dealing with, the themes that they are dealing with, the characters that they are portraying in their writings, in their poems, in their novels, is something that one must ponder about. That gives a entry point into the inquiry of what it is to imagine oneself or to think oneself as a writer writing in 19th century Britain. And typically the society is at the time when the society is constructed in such a way that you can't exist in a very independent manner, not only as an author but as a woman, and how you're going to express yourself is being looked at, and perceptions are being formed. So you have to negotiate with all of that to express yourself creatively, so that you're not being too rational, you're not being you have to straddle a very difficult path that's there. So with that awareness, one must look at the life and times of Christina Rossetti to contextualize the poem further. And for that, we'll take a look at her life. Christina Georgina Rossetti is one of the prominent Victorian poets. She has Victorian poets because 19th century includes the Victorian era as well. She has become a part of the canon of Victorian poetry read everywhere in the world today. Goblin Market is her well-known poem. She published Goblin Market and other poems and The Prince's Progress and other poems in 1862 and 1866 respectively. Her other collections include Pageant, The Face of Deep, Time Flies, and new poems, the one that was published posthumously. Her father, she belongs to an illustrious family. Her father, Gabriel Rossetti, was a poet and a teacher. Dante Gabriel Rossetti, the famous painter, Pre-Raphaelite painter and poet, was her brother. In early 1859, Rossetti started volunteering. Why I'm telling you about this particular event in her life? Because it is somehow and indirectly or directly related to the poem that we are going to discuss. In early 1859, Rossetti started volunteering at the St. Mary Magdalene Penitentiary in Highgate, an institution dedicated to rehabilitating women labeled as fallen. And we will talk about this idea of fallen women in a while, and that is why it has been put in quotation marks. Her engagement with the work there also influenced her poetry. Goblin Market also portrays a fallen woman saved by her sister. The poem directly draws from her experiences at the penitentiary. So this is what her life has been, and I have just picked up a portion, an event from her life, which is very important for us to understand and contextualize that particular activity that she was involved in to understand what is going on in the poem. So the details of the poem as it is available to students is already there. So what we are going to now look at is the perspectives that one can have while reading and understanding the poem. So first of all, one has to understand what is Rossetti doing in this poem, while telling a story of two sisters, two maidens living a very happy life, a self-sufficient, in a very self-sufficient household, and subscribing to all the ideas of femininity that society has prescribed for them. And one fine day something happens, and one of the sisters ventures into a different direction altogether, the direction that was, prescribed for her for a very long time, and then the repercussions happen, and then how she is saved by her sister, and then it becomes a sort of a cautionary tale, a tale that is being conventionally told to children, largely, so that the same act which has a negative ending, which by negative ending I mean it often results in either the death of the protagonist, the death of the character, or some sort of punishment is meted out to them so that they become an example of sorts for others, and they do not replicate the behavior, they do not copy the behavior that they had indulged in. So that's the idea of the cautionary tale. So that poem ends at that particular point where both Laura and Lizzie, they sit and then they tell their children that this is what had happened and you shouldn't be doing anything like it. But that's not the entire point of the poem, and that is in fact the beauty of reading such a text, because it diverges a lot and kind of introduces you and presents in front of you multiple layers that the text carries, and the moment you start uncovering them, you realize that how brilliant and how ahead of times this particular poem was. So that is why I have titled this particular section as "What is Rossetti doing in this poem?" Because a lot of times that may be, though it's more of a cliche now to read a poem like that, but that can be understood simplistically in that way. So she is first of all trying to negotiate the radical with the conservative, and when I'm saying that, I have many authors, critics in my mind who have tried to point out towards this entire idea where a woman writer, not only in 19th century but much before that, what they were trying to do was to talk about something very radical, something very problematic in the sense of the society, in a manner that will not be protested against in a very bashful manner, as one would expect when that message would be very violently put up there in front of the readers or the larger society. So to say something radical in a very conservative way. That is why, the second point here, she is also undercutting the idea of the cautionary tale. She is exploiting, in fact, the idea of the cautionary tale. And just to explain what a cautionary tale is, if one can think of a poem by Tennyson, who's another one of the three giant pillars of the 19th century British poetry. Tennyson, Browning and Arnold, one of them. So Tennyson has written one poem, Lady of Shalott, which can be seen as a cautionary tale, where a woman who's been asked to not to look beyond the tower that she lives in and not to look in the mirror, she kind of dares to look the other way, and she kind of defies the norms or the instructions that were given to her, and then she is punished by the end of the day, as she dies by the end of the narrative as well. So such a poem can be seen as a cautionary tale, and it is happening in the same century, in the same time when Christina Rossetti is also writing. So there were many cautionary tales written at that particular time, where they were used as an example to teach the moral of the story to women, to children, or whosoever that was meant to stay in a particular system that holds a kind of power or maintains a kind of, power. So, she undercuts the idea of cautionary tale by negotiating the radical with the conservative. As a woman author, you cannot be, very radical. You have to stay within the limits. But the intelligence of the author lies where she is able to pass the message on in a way that is not breaking the boundaries. It's like not breaking the glass ceiling, but causing a chink in it is a feat enough for them. And that is how we should look at, a lot of texts that we are reading as a part of 19th century, 18th century, or whatsoever, because the 21st century reader's tendency is to look at the texts that were written at a particular time from our perspective and tagging them as outdated or, cliched, or, they are regressive, or they're not up to the mark in terms of the message that they are, passing on. So that shouldn't be there. That there should be awareness that even if it is just talking about the pain or the entrapment of a particular character or whatever, the point of the story, the plot point, it is actually creating a space to voice that particular concern, and it is being validated in some or the other way while it is being talked about. So that is something that one must, understand. It is not just about going the other way in a very radical manner and breaking the boundaries and shattering the glass ceiling always. So that is what she has done. And coming to the third point, she is also trying or has successfully done is what she has done is to recreate the meaning of public and the private sphere. Now this is very important to understand because in 19th century and in all times everywhere, there are two spheres that we can think of, and these two spheres are very gendered, the public one and the private one. So the private one is conventionally, clichédly, in a very gender stereotypical way, is subscribed to women largely, and the public one is a realm where they are not supposed to enter because bad things happen there, supposedly the bad things which they are not meant to see or watch or hear or experience. It's a place where men reside. It's a place where market happens. It's a place where you become visible. So you're not supposed to be visible, because when you're visible, then things would happen, and that's not the sphere for you, because that's how it has been understood. So what she does in the poem is, if you kind of take a look at the text of the poem, is that she tries to build a private sphere which is a household in a very self-sufficient manner, where the women, both Laura and Lizzie, the protagonists of the story poem that we are reading, they are sufficient, efficient in a manner that they are able to run the household on their own. They are doing the chores from morning till evening. They are, rearing the kettles. They are managing the crops, everything that makes one, sustain the household. They are involved in the process from top to bottom. And they also go out, they also come back. They are, the home that is often seen as being run at, two levels, where, you're supposed to, women conventionally are supposed to cook and, churn the butter and do all the menial task, and the money will come from outside. But here they are, managing everything there, and in a hypothetical manner, they are also, sustaining themselves economically while they are, doing that. Because you see in the poem, where the money is coming from. I mean, they are pursing the coin, particularly Laura, Lizzie, when she kind of puts the coin in her purse to go and buy fruits from goblins for her yearning sister, the suffering sister. Where is the money coming from? So it is coming from somewhere, and if it is coming from not from any other resource, they are the one who are maintaining that. So that kind of a self-sufficient private sphere we are looking at, and then you also see a public sphere where they venture out. They think that they have to come back. One of them actually comes back. But Lizzie comes back, but Laura, somehow gives into her desires, which will be a point as we kind of, progress with this particular, idea later on to be discussed. So that idea, of going out, delving into the public sphere, and knowing the kind of, constraints that they have upon them. When they go to the market, Laura is listening to the cries, the howls of goblins where they are selling the fruits, like come buy, come buy. That's the, rhyme that is repeated throughout the poem. But one of the sisters, she is saying that, no, we are not supposed to look, we are not supposed to go, we just, hold yourself together and we will go to our house. But she succumbs and she gives into it, and then goes to the market and suffers as well. And this becomes a very curious point when you see that, and that will also be discussed, later on in the session, that Laura, when she is, she is trying to save Lizzie, Lizzie is trying to save her sister, so she musters the courage and breaks the boundaries of that private sphere and goes into that public one for the sake of her sister, to save her and then come back. So she has broken those very limits that were, restrained, that were put on her in a way that one couldn't have imagined to happen, or that would have been seen as blasphemous, for that matter, for a woman to do that. But she does that, and it's been put in a form of a poem, in a story-like pattern, in a characterization of that sort for readers to understand, and that happens in a very swift manner throughout the poem. What she also does is that she recasts the idea of sisterhood. So for her, sisterhood just does not remain a biological kinship. It kind of, takes a different direction, where sisterhood becomes a point of recasting the characters as saviors. So that is also that we are looking at, and we are going to ponder at this point with the help of a very important essay written by Janet Galligani Casey in a while after this particular slide. And she also foregrounds desire. Desirous women are always punished. They are expressive women. Conventionally, they are not considered the ideal, for that matter. So when viewed from these, constructed standards of femininity, not only in 19th century Britain, but in 21st century anywhere, if you can think of, through the character of Laura, although she has been portrayed as a guileless or the more innocent one, what Rossetti is doing is to make desire the prime suspect and also the focus of the story. Right? I mean, a moment ago I told you about, how if one is putting certain idea on focus, and focus, that also is basically, trying to stretch the limits of what topics, one can talk about, what all points that one can include in the debate. So it's in a very subtle way that she, does that. She foregrounds the desire. right? I talked about Lady of Shalott a while ago. Lady of Shalott, she was punished because she was desirous, right? So desire is something that a woman must not, possess, and if she does, then she'll be punished or she'll suffer. That's the whole idea of it. But she very well, Rossetti very well, foregrounds that idea, plays with it, and somehow legitimizes it as well, because when you see that Laura is enjoying, the entire process of eating fruits, relishing them, and how wonderfully she has, tasted them, and she tells about it to her sister that I have never tasted anything like that ever in my life. So she has relished all of it. The joy of tasting those fruits that were told to not to even look at, earlier. That could happen only because she was desirous and also curious, to a certain point. So that is something that is happening, where you can see she's foregrounding the desire, where she is putting desire as a focus of the story. The moment, Laura, as I said, tastes fruits, she expresses the joy she has never experienced before. I talked about it. So this foregrounding of body, of sensuality, because if you look at the language of the poem, it is a very sensual one. One cannot deny the fact, the way bodies are being foregrounded, the bodies are being, brought close together. Sisters are laying, close, putting their heads together, golden head by golden head. That's how the, line goes in the poem. So, and the whole, vocabulary, where the sister gets drenched in fruit juices, and then she wants to kind of taste that, so she kind of talks about her body in that way. So the entire vocabulary, the foregrounding of the body, desire, all of that seems like a very hush thing if you think of 19th century society, or literature for that matter. They were not being talked about in this particular way. And that's why, one of the initial critics of this particular poem was told about this poem as a very, very, unabashed poem that also, is leveling on the level of being seen. So that is what is there. You will talk about redefining redemption with the help of Casey's essay. All of that is there. So let's just directly, go to what Casey is talking about. So she says that Christina Rossetti uses the term sisterhood in Goblin Market, reveals the same underlying concept that both male and female roles are in fact available to everyone. Through the central figures, Lizzie and Laura, Rossetti demonstrates that the female and ultimately all people may potentially act as redeemer and redeemed, as nurturer and nurtured. In Judeo-Christian tradition, the role of the redeemer, the role of the savior, has been traditionally subscribed to men. But here what you see, while one of the sisters is being is acting as a savior, that recasting is happening here. So the definition of sisterhood here is of interdependence, in terms of, if you try to think in terms of savior and saved, the redemption, who has been given redemption, and the idea of fallen women. Of course, fallen women are not meant to be the outcast of the society as they were, understood at one, that particular time. They can be put back in society. They can live the life that they want to live in that manner. So I am, leaving you with this idea of, sisterhood here. And if you think of sisterhood, if you think of the idea of redemption, and then read this particular poem, you will come up with meanings multiple in nature and would do an enriching reading of the poem. So that is all for today. We'll take up the poem and talk about some of the other issues there in the upcoming sessions. Thank you for today. Thank you for being a patient listener.